Hi, I'm James and welcome to another video. Now, I've done a few videos on the background for Twilight 2000 and one of the big criticisms of the background has been the missing 500,000 American servicemen who are referred to in the referee's guide in the background as being drafted and trained and sent to Europe and nothing. So I did some digging round. Now, I'm not an American, so I had to find out a bit about the Selective service system first. So, well, this is what I found from my research. Apologies to Americans who know all of this, but for us Europeans, we don't have that. And being British, we've not had conscription since the, as we called it, since the 1960s. So it's a bit of an anomaly for us. So how did it work in real life? Well, people had to register at the age of 18 and they had to keep the board up to date and informed up until the age of 25. And interesting anomaly I found, which gives a really nice background for NPCs or for even characters, if you want something a bit different, is immigrants who are non-citizens had to register as well. Now, I found that one an interesting anomaly. Now, there were people who tried to evade it. They generally weren't punished, and nobody has been prosecuted since the mid-80s for this in real life. How this would work in Twilight 2000 I think will be slightly different. It does mention there are riots and things regarding this, so I think it's a fair assumption that there would be prosecutions. Generally in real life it's only the people who publicly have made a big issue about who've actually been prosecuted. But it is actually punishable by 5 years in prison and up to $250,000 fine. So it's quite a significant penalty. There's also factors that will come in later, like not registering will affect your ability to get student payments. So it's a big decision not to do it. Now, there was a pause up till 1980 when you had the Russian invasion of Afghanistan. At that point then registration resumed. So it's quite realistic for for all of the characters age-wise to fit, because by 1987 everybody who hadn't registered would have dropped off the system based on the ages. So the procedure for actually activating it was the President and still is, the President and Congress have to authorise it, and it can only be authorised in cases where voluntary enlistment will not give enough volunteers for the military's needs. So Twilight 2000 with World War kicking off, yeah, it's not unreasonable for the President to actually activate that. Now, it's a lottery based on birthdays, and what happens is 2 giant balls with all the dates and the numbers 1 to 365, 366 for leap years are put in, and the dates are drawn with the number, basically putting them in order, because not everybody is going to get conscripted. And let's say the first number 1 was the 24th of August. With that, anybody born on the 24th of August is the priority. Then once they've got all of that, they move on to number 2 and so on. Now, if they find that there aren't enough in an age category, then they actually go through it. The priority call-up order is 20-year-olds, followed by 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and then dropping back to 19 and 18. Now, normally in peacetime, they have a national headquarters, 3 regional headquarters, and a data management centre, plus the local and district boards. On mobilisation, the organisation massively increases. 56 state headquarters are created, which I find an interesting anomaly with the number of states, 400 plus area offices, and 40 alternative service offices, because people can claim exemption as a conscientious objector. Now, that is not registered in advance. That is only done when people are actually selected. A lot of Americans do write on there that they are on the card that they are a conscientious objector. That is not considered until they're actually selected. There's no record kept of that. Now, those figures for how many there need to be, that's actually based on the system's own figures. That's what they think they need. In Twilight 2000 terms, I don't think there'd be any need for any variation on that. I think that would work fairly well. So once these are all set up, they then evaluate the physical, mental and moral health of the people being selected, and they can then decide whether they're drafted or not based on that. And they then, the person who is selected has 10 days then to try and claim a deferment, a postponement or an exemption. And the requirement is that this system has to deliver the inductees to the military within 193 days by law. So if we're looking at 193 days, let's look at the background. With the background, in 1998 it says President West starts the process and activates 500,000, and these are trained up and starting to arrive in Europe by the end of 1998. So if we assume that that was done right at the start of 1998, by the time we get the people coming through and we also have the time to train them, we could be getting the first ones through for then. I think the 500,000 by that point might be slightly optimistic. It's probably assuming that there's no bureaucratic hiccups and so on. But it's not particularly unreasonable. Now, when they actually are trained up, it notes in the referee's guide that they do have some problems. Equipment is lacking, and generally these are equipped with older pattern equipment. So you do have the possibility there of arming them with the older series kit, so you're probably looking at M16A1s, possibly M14s. You could also come up with limited standard weapons, in the same way that if you look in World War II, there are a considerable number of alternative weapons issued as a limited standard because production just can't keep pace. And I can see the same happening here. So you might find that something like the Mini 14 becomes an issue weapon briefly. You may find things like that. So that's a distinct possibility there. Now, I also dug around a bit with the numbers. Now, America has got a population of 328.2 million. Now, the military is made up of just over 1 million, 480,000 active, 336,000 in the National Guard, and 280,000 in the Army Reserve. Now, 500,000 draftees, therefore, only actually makes up 1 in 3. If anything, that seems too low. I think it should be higher. Admittedly, we're talking not having long to train them. And the 500,000, I am assuming, refers to the end of 1998. 1999, you probably would have had another call-up, perhaps another 500,000 or so then, and just keeping going at that sort of pace. It may even be that if the war hadn't caused problems, the second year you could have had a lot more trained up, because by that point you've expanded your training facilities. Having said that, obviously production of equipment is going to be at a lower rate. Even for light infantry units, there is a significant amount of equipment required. You may struggle to get that together. Even pulling in older stocks, things like that, you're probably still going to be short. So, okay, it changed my attitude a little towards when we were looking at the military, because I've always assumed that in Twilight 2000 the bulk of the military were draftees. It's probably significantly lower. They might be affected slightly by the fact that you probably would have people volunteering, because there was in Vietnam an advantage to volunteering. You had a bit more say in what you were doing. There's quite a few accounts I've read of people volunteering so that they weren't seen as a draftee. So you could get that. So it is possible that the figures could be slightly mixed that way. And it also just put things in perspective as well. If we start looking at it figure-wise, the divisional strength is somewhere between 10 and 15,000. So that does mean an awful lot of troops. Just as a interesting comparison, I did a quick look at the Soviet figures. I managed to find that the Soviets had 4.1 million reservists out of a population of 144.4 million. Bearing in mind the Russians had conscription, where people served for 2 years, 3 if they were in the Navy, before returning to civilian life and could be called up. So it's still a massive disadvantage for NATO, even if you start factoring in all the other NATO countries. So what happened to these 500,000 troops then? That's a big question for a lot of people. Now, I've made an assumption that 500,000 are all army. So I'm talking potentially here a big increase. If they weren't army initially, by 2000 they are now. You have sailors, you have aircrew, they are all now going to be infantry. So we'll work on that figure. That way then we also probably allow for the fact we would have had the volunteers who basically volunteered not to be draftees and things. They're going to come into that as well. So let's consider it. Now, I think probably a significant number have probably been left in the United States. If anything, as you're deploying more and more troops overseas that are already ready to go, these light divisions are probably good replacements for them. That's a good option. That means that for things like civil disorder, disaster relief, you have a lot of them there. You also have combat deaths. There's going to be a significant proportion of combat deaths, and being realistic, again, who are the ones who are going to die first in combat? It's the people with less experience. And that was very much a World War II experience, where people didn't even talk to the new guys usually for a few days, didn't bother learning names, let them become veterans, then they would talk to them. Very harsh, but from, I suppose, a practical viewpoint, it kind of makes sense. So there will be a significant number of combat deaths. Also non-combat deaths. Now, the last time that there were more deaths from disease than from combat was the Crimean War. Twilight 2000 kind of implies that you're going to get an awful lot of them, possibly even coming close figure-wise. So that's another significant number. It's clear from the background that some are lost in transit, but it's not going to be the significant numbers that some people have suggested. I think that there would be large numbers of losses, but probably not as many as we think. Desertions would probably be quite a large number. It's fairly clear that a lot of the deserters are from all the armies, so there's going to be some there. And while we've said they've come to Europe, when I was researching through the force list, all we have are the troop numbers for Poland. Now, there's a decent chance that significant numbers could be in Germany, in rear areas, being withdrawn. You may find that there are some, as per previous editions, on the periphery, places like Yugoslavia and things. We obviously don't know what's going on there yet, but there's no guarantee that these would all have been sent straight to the front line. You could also read the background that some have been sent to the Middle East. That's always a possibility. Korea is a possibility. There are options where they could have gone elsewhere. So that would probably allow for a few more. I think between all of those, we can probably get the figure looking fairly realistic. The suggested figure that they could have completely replaced all divisions in Europe, yeah, that probably would be the case. But that doesn't allow for, as I say, for any being hived off to other areas. Even if they had, to have units with a 100% loss rate after all of the fighting, the nuclear weapons, the chemical weapons, the disease, the desertions, actually, I think it's achievable from a statistics perspective. I would be interested to see what Free League expand on this. I'm kind of hoping they do. We know that there's various supplements on the way. Quite looking forward to seeing those. I particularly can't wait for the third one, the Black Madonna, particularly after the hints that Frank has dropped in my interview with him. So we may find out more and more as the game is published. Please put your comments below. I'm always interested to hear what people think, even if you disagree with me. As long as you're civil, I have no problem with that, because I actually want discussion on this game. I want the game to succeed. And I know the people who've put the criticisms in feel exactly the same way, because it's a game that we all love and we want it to go well. So please put your comments in. If there's an interest, I may even do a follow-up to this. And I'll also, again, if there's an interest, look at other aspects in the background. So see you soon for another review.